The rain poured relentlessly, and the fierce, unceasing drumming of water on the metal roof of my car was the only familiar sound that surrounded me on that dreadful night. The resonant, wet rhythm filled my mind, drowning out all other thoughts, except for the bone-deep exhaustion. I'm 35, and I feel as if this slippery, endless mountain road, this deep, dark night, and the heavy silence of the mountains are the only witnesses to a weariness beyond my strength, a fatigue that has taken root from months of relentless tension and clashes with my neighbor Michael. He had pushed me to the brink of madness. It was nearly 2 in the morning. The hands of the digital clock on the dashboard caught my eye with their faint green glow, marking the passage of time with a barely audible ticking. That ticking was, in truth, a countdown of my life. To keep sleep at bay, I reached for the bag of salt and vinegar chips resting on the passenger seat. My fingertips brushed the slick plastic of the bag, but at that very moment, the sky opened up. A blinding light flash of lightning, followed by a deafening crack, illuminated the entire mountain for a split second. In that instant of terror brought on by the lightning, my fans went limp, and the bag of chips slipped from the seat, landing on the dirty floor mat with a muffled thud. Then, in a split second of instinct, a fatal, foolish mistake I will curse myself for forever, I took my eyes off the road, just for the briefest moment, to grab the chips. My entire fate changed in that single second. And then it happened. The terrible impact that brought my life to a sudden halt. The sound was horrific and confusing, like 2 massive stones colliding, mixed with the splintering of wood and the crushing of bone beneath steel. The noise sank deep into my marrow, steel grinding against flesh and bone, tearing it apart. The car shuddered violently, veered to one side, and then with the screech of tires sliding across wet asphalt, came to a jarring, trembling stop. The sickly stench of burnt oil and petrol, the metallic reek of crushed metal, and with it, the sharp, salty, unbearable smell of fresh blood filled the cabin. It took me minutes to undo my seatbelt and realize I was still in my skin and breathing. My hands were numb and shaking. I forced the car door open. Rain lashed my face. I stared into the glare of the headlights. Not far off, a broken shape lay on the asphalt. I moved toward the lights, step by step. The first thing I saw was a thick patch of blood, watered by rain, spreading across the black tarmac. And then her. She lay there, a young woman, maybe 30, her white dress marked now with dark, spreading stains. Her eyes were open, wide, staring up at the sky. I dropped to my knees. I slipped my hand gently beneath her neck. No pulse. Cold. She was dead. I had killed her, frozen in terror and shock. I heard a groan that spoke of unbearable pain. A few meters away, a large brown voice lay on its side, struggling to rise, its legs broken beneath it. Its agonized cries were the screams of an innocent victim. In that moment, the puzzle in my mind fell into place. The terrifying lightning, the panicked horse, and the young girl thrown onto the road during the ride. It wasn't my fault. It was the storm's. But she was dead. I moved toward the voice in those moments, lost in pity and horror for the animal. I had forgotten the girl. When I turned back, she was gone. The young girl's body, left where it had fallen, had simply vanished. Only a large pool of blood remained on the asphalt, slowly being washed away by the rain. My breath caught in my chest. This was the work of a human. Fear gave way to something colder and harsher. The terror of exposure and the consequences that would follow. About 200 meters away, a red light glowed in the darkness. An old pickup, the rusty yellow Volvo that only one man in the village owned, Michael, was there. He was at the scene of my vanished crime. Now he had taken the body. He meant to use it as leverage to destroy me completely. I had to get away. I ran for my car. My mind raced like a mad thing the whole way to my villa. When I arrived, I grabbed a coiled hose and a stiff brush and scrubbed the blood from the hood and bumper of my car. I went back home and threw myself onto the bed. The moment my head sank into the pillow, the silence of the night shattered. At first, it was just a dry whisper, like the rustle of dead leaves. But the whispers grew closer, turning into a sorrowful, trembling moan. It was her voice, Miriam, the girl I had killed. Her words echoed in my ear. "My blood is on your hands, Jack. You left me to die in the mud." The sharp, metallic scent of blood filled my lungs again. I opened my eyes. There, in the middle of the room, was a patch of darkness, blacker than the rest of the night. I turned on the light. No one was there, but the voice returned. "You left me alone. You buried me in the dirt." Suddenly, the false ceiling above me began to drip. Not water, but a thick, black substance, like dried blood, mixed with sticky mud. The first drop hit my forehead. It was cold, and it reeked of something awful. I jumped out of bed and ran for the door. Bursting out of the room, I sprinted toward the bathroom. My terrified face stared back at me from the mirror. "Did you see how I died?" My reflection began to twist, horribly, impossibly. It was no longer me. It was Miriam. Pale skin, eyes wide open and lifeless, a dark stream of blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Miriam's reflection grinned at me, a cold, cruel smile. I slammed my hands against the mirror with all my strength. I ran down the hallway, but it was no longer the hallway of my house. The walls were dark and damp, draped with moss and mud. Beneath my feet, the floor had turned into the cold, wet asphalt of the road. At the end of the corridor stood a horse, Miriam's horse. From its mouth hung not a bridle, but a torn piece of Miriam's light dress, soaked in blood. The horse let out a shrill, piercing neigh, not of pain, but of pure terror. As it screamed, the hallway began to shrink around me. I was trapped. You made me leave this worried. Miriam's voice came from every direction, surrounding me. I pressed myself against the door to the living room and pushed it open. Inside, every piece of furniture was covered in a thick layer of cold ash. In the center of the room sat the vanquished body of her horse, and beside it lay a bag of salt and vinegar chips, smeared with mud and blood. Suddenly, the horse's corpse on the chair opened its eyes and stared straight at me. "Confess," it whispered, in Miriam's voice. I fell to my knees. Terror and guilt devoured me from within. "Yes, I'm sorry. It was my fault. I looked away for that one moment. Please, stop. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." With every word of apology, the stench of blood faded, and the layers of ash began to dissolve. When the final word left my lips, everything vanished. Only the bruise on my wrist remained. My grief had to be erased. It was the only way to save myself. The next day, I found out Vicky had been admitted to a city hospital with severe chest pain. It felt like a dark omen, an opportunity. I went into town and hid near the hospital, waiting. Nothing happened. Pale and weak, Vico was discharged and sent back to the village. That same day, another storm rolled in, and Vico's horse bolted from the stable and fled into the woods. The whole village mobilized, but the horse was never found. It was the perfect opening. Vico was frail, on edge, desperate to find his only valuable possession. He had to be taken out before he could tell the police about the missing body. In the kitchen, I grabbed the butcher's knife and, with obsessive care, sharpened its dull edge. Night fell. His voice was thin and full of pain. "I found your horse, Michael." Silence answered, long and suspicious. "Come to the brickworks. Away from prying eyes. We'll meet there and go after it in your truck." Half an hour later, Michael's truck arrived with a tired rumble. He climbed out, pale-faced, but his eyes were as wicked and distrustful as ever. When he saw the footage, his eyes widened. Then greed and grim satisfaction took over. He looked at me and with a haughty tone said, "All right, Jack. You, Lynn. Let's go." We drove into the forest in Mikey's truck. The journey was heavy with silence. We left the truck on the main road and continued on foot. After an hour of grueling walking through mud and sludge, we reached the tree and the horse. Vico rushed to the horse with almost reverent care. He knelt and began untying the rope, moving his lips with sweet, flattering words. "Well done, Jack. You did the right thing. I won't forget this." The words sent a shiver through me. I drew the knife I had hidden under my coat. My hand did not tremble. Michael's back was to me, fully absorbed in his horse. I struck with all my strength. The sound of metal cutting into flesh was horrifying. A second, a third strike, Michael's scream was choked off. The voice neighed in terror and slammed against the tree. Michael collapsed into the mud and sludge, only his eyes remaining open. He tried to reach for me, but all his strength was gone. A few hours later, in that same dark place in the forest, I buried Michael beneath the roots of an ancient tree. It was filthy work, but necessary. My hands were bloody, tired, and low, yet a drunken rush of relief and triumph ran through my veins like liquor. The threat was gone. The young girl's body, Michael's body, two secrets interred in the heart of the woods. I went back to the villa. I washed myself and collapsed onto the couch. Finally, peace, but it lasted less than 5 minutes. The door opened and a shadow stepped into the living room. She stood there, light dress, hair wet and disheveled, her face a pale ghost and her eyes full of grief and torment. It was her, Miriam's spirit. I felt my breath seize with terror. She took a step forward. Her gaze was fixed, and in it I saw not sorrow, but hatred. Michael, her voice was cold and metallic. Could you think I was a spirit, Jack? Sarah continued. Michael fired me. After he took Miriam's body, he came to me. He said if I haunted you as Miriam's spirit, driving you out of the village, he'd pay me a lot of money. All those nightmares, the cries, the shadows, it was all me, Jack, because of Michael. In an instant, all my plans and illusions crumbled. Michael and a twin sister had driven me to the brink of madness, Sarah went on. Michael and I worked together until this morning. When you called me, I grew suspicious. I followed you, Jack. From a distance, I saw how you killed Michael and buried him. She knew. She had witnessed everything. She now held all my secrets, from the accident to the murder. She ran toward the door. I'm going to the police. I'll tell them everything. Both of you. Dick, I was like a wounded animal. Only one instinct remained. Absolute survival. I screamed and lunged at her. A brutal struggle tore through that dark morning. She kept trying to reach the door, and I shoved her back into the room. Vases smashed, and tables and chairs collided in a violent crash. Despite her small frame, Sarah moved with a vicious strength born of fear and hate. Her long nails ripped across my face. Blood poured from deep gashes along my cheek, and my vision blurred. I hit her, one strike, another, slamming her against the wall and buying a fleeting moment of space. She fought her way to the villa door, threw it open, and disappeared into the darkness and the autumn rain. Running toward the road, wounded, exhausted, and drenched in my own blood, I sank to my knees on the ground. I heard her footsteps fading across the lead asphalt. My breaths were heavy and erratic. My heartbeat thundered in my ears like war drums. I raised my hands and stared at the raindrops stabbing my face like needles, the rain washing everything away, except what roared inside me. For a moment, the world fell into a deadly silence, a silence filled with unspeakable possibilities. I knew that sooner or later, The glare of police lights would pierce this small, quiet villa deep in the mountains. I knew that the evidence would in some way be found, or maybe not. Everything could be blamed on a random accident or on a hidden conspiracy, depending on who believed and who remained silent. Pain and dizziness dragged me down. I fell onto my back and stared out the dark window. The road where Sarah had vanished shivered with the reflection of headlights on wet asphalt, as if pointing toward an uncertain future. Tears and rain became one, and the boundary between reality and nightmare grew fainter with every passing second. From within the fog, the distant hum of engines rose. A haunting murmur from another world. As I lay there, staring at the damp ceiling, my mind replayed memories in a feverish loop. Miriam's face that night, the horse's shrill screams, Michael's vague grin, and now Sarah's small, furious face disappearing into the dark. Something inside me broke, not just flesh and bone, but the last fragile thread of conscience I had left. Everything was buried together, or was meant to be, in the wet soil of the forest. I was alone, wounded, terrified, and burdened with a sorrow that still left room for regret, though far too late for redemption. In the heart of that dark night, between rain and shadows, between truth and the illusion I had crafted myself, one feeling lingered. There is only a thin line between salvation and ruin, and I was standing right on its edge. The distant sound of sirens began to rise, faint at first, like a low hum, then closer, louder. Blue and red lights crept over the haze, like two awakening eyes staring straight into my soul. My heart pounded like a hammer in my chest. I didn't know whether I could speak a single word to save myself, or if every word I uttered would only tighten the noose around my neck. In the end, silence was all I had left. A heavy, suffocating silence that verged with the sound of the falling rain. It wasn't over, and this was the dark, open-ended close to my story. I was still alive, with blood on my hands and a nightmare that would devour my days and nights. And someone out there escaped, carrying the weight of vengeance. Lying on the cold, rain-soaked floor of the villa, my eyes burning from fear and regret, I finally understood one bitter truth. My life had reached a point of no return, and whatever scene came next could only be one of two things: justice or complete annihilation.